Welcome to Community Insight, a show about the family well-being movement. I'm your host, Valerie Frost. Artificial intelligence has burst onto the scene, and it's already reshaping how people work, communicate, and make decisions. But in child welfare and family well-being spaces, many people are still trying to understand what AI actually means for families, young people, and systems that are already carrying enormous power. People who are studying this see both opportunity and serious risks. There are growing concerns that AI could deepen surveillance, bias, and harm if the same assumptions that already exist in systems become embedded into the technology itself. Today's guest, Derrick Stephens, is working directly inside that tension. Derrick is the co-founder of a tech company that has created a product to help young people navigate complex systems more effectively and create new pathways towards stability and opportunity. In today's conversation, he talks about how AI tools are being designed, who gets to shape them, and why lived experience and community input matter in the development process. I started by asking Derrick where he's already seeing AI show up in child welfare and family well-being today. So, Derrick, AI is already part of everyday life. But many people in child welfare and family well-being, they may not realize how close it already is to the field. So I want to start really simply, where are you already seeing AI show up in child welfare and family well-being?
I think that's a funny question because it depends on where you are. I would say largely there's not enough showing up in child welfare and health and human services. It's starting to show up in things like CWIS, but are we really pushing the bounds that are available? Not in my opinion today.
All right, so you gave one example. So how is AI playing into CWIS? Can you go into that a little bit more?
So if I think about the Home for Every Child initiative, right? So there are organizations that are currently creating software that help determine kinship. So using algorithms to match youth with families, using algorithms to take data sets such as religion or ethnicity, and then using that to make a percentage match. So even if I have 2 or 3 family members or a couple different foster homes, this is supposed to bring me closer to making a match that it can create some longevity and a better match for that youth. So there are ways that it's being introduced and used by some companies in different ways, and I would say that's another example of one.
All right, so you started to say with the first question I asked that maybe it's underutilized. So we just mentioned, all right, AI is here. People may have a different understanding of how much or what it can do. But the next question is, okay, once you have that understanding that it is here, is it a good thing for families is the next question. So why should people in this field take AI seriously right now? Not just as a trend, but as something that could actually improve outcomes for families?
Yeah, you pose a great question. And I think you have to be serious about it right now because right now is when we are at the foundation of determining what things are going to look like, governance, how to use it. So I want to clarify that it is being utilized, not in the sense that it's overutilized. It's being utilized, but it's not being stretched in ways that we could design together. And that's one of my big things, right? So our families being brought to the table in a real way to co-design AI algorithms, determine what governance looks like, ethics, how will we use them, surveillance. So it's being utilized, but I don't know if the right people are at the table all the time consistently helping to determine what we utilize, how we utilize it, when we utilize it, and who has access to actually utilize these tools.
Let's pause on the process and the how for a minute, and let's just stick to what is the opportunity? If the governance was in place, if the right people were at the table doing it, what can AI actually do for families?
So firsthand, AI is, to me, at the core of family strengthening, or can be if used correctly. So for example, I've been working with youth in my nonprofit Underdog Dreams for 20 plus years. And I have a lot of youth that reach out to me for different needs. I'm getting ready to get evicted, to I just had a car accident, I don't have a license, to I need this resource or that resource, or I don't have my birth certificate. They generally don't have access to the type of technologies that allow them to answer some of those questions very quickly. So seeing that need, building out a software that now allows them to go to a AI powered software that they already have access to data. So I'll pause there as an example. What if we got to a point where when I aged out, that there was a data transfer, a data migration of my data from the system or health systems or whoever has data, that then brings this over into my own portal, that now I have a driver's license, I have my birth certificate. And those things start to get to the fundamentals of family, being able to get a job, being able to get skilled, being able to get good, solid policy advice in the moment. And so that's where I think it's important to have families at the table, youth at the table, so that when these tools are being designed, it's being designed in a way that the community can benefit, in a way that is from prevention, right? I'm in control of my own destiny to a certain extent because I know the resources right around the corner. I know the steps I need to take in order to access those resources, and I can do all of that from the palm of my hand, or with an agentic AI who helps me to do that. You got
So,
it.
thinking about this, you talk about youth aging out, permanency for youth and independence, and all of that comes up a lot, right? Like the life skills, and that's with that navigation. You also mentioned with kinship earlier, like finding family and family placements. So, how do you see AI unlocking something that the field hasn't been able to do well yet?
Oh man, that's a rabbit hole, right? It's kind of, where do you want to go first? And I guess I'll start now. If you said the field specifically, I think I'm seeing that's where the move to modernize is coming, right?
Hmm.
When we talk about CWIS, we talk about licensing, and that moves allows the workforce to be more efficient, right? In theory, it should allow them to have more time for critical thinking and decision making, insights, to be better, to spend more time with families, to even determine if I should be here in the first place, right? So I see the field is starting to embrace modernization through, federal legislation with CWIS, and then I think now that people start to test things, they see where accessing AI and tech, and we keep saying AI, it's not just AI, right? Modernization is all kind of things, VR, mixed reality, simple tools like Gemini and Notebook. So it's not this like this huge software thing. It's just people leveraging technology and AI to make better decisions and bring better resources to people in the moment.
All right, so I'm not super techie into all this, but I have enough of an understanding. Let's say some of the listeners are just nothing, like they made a MySpace and they were done with technology after that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You mentioned AI supporting efficiency and actually freeing up time for deep thought and creativity, which may not be a natural thought. Someone may think, oh no, all this VR, AI, whatever is something new I have to learn, more work on top of my job. So can you explain that? Like how does modernization actually create more space?
All right, let me take a step back and let me explain it from kind of a real world. So I'm a clinical social worker by trade. So I've spent my entire career working with people, humans, kids, adults. So as a clinician, if I'm looking back in early 2000s and I was working with a family and I wanted to provide resources or give them my time, I'm balancing a caseload, right, and paper. I remember working in a hospital where I had to literally go to a paper chart and start going through that paper chart, right? This is where we started, right? And so that takes away from efficiency. Although I want to talk to you, I have ten patients and I've got to go through charts and figure things out, right? You fast forward to, um, I don't know, ChatGPT, the early stages, right? I would then be able to say, if I was going to work with a family and I'm working with a young kid and I don't know how to ask certain questions because I'm used to working with the elderly in the hospital. Now I could go to something as simple as ChatGPT as a clinician and say, hey, I'm a clinician. Give me a couple ways to ask this question in an age appropriate way. By me getting that right and asking that question in the right way and having that quick resource to give me 5 different ways and how to ask that question, that then gives me time to really engage with that youth, that adult, that elderly individual, because I didn't have to spend so much time trying to read through how to talk to them and trying to go through a training, right? So then you get me in that moment. Then it was, we literally used to have these binders of resources. So you build up your binder, right? And the more resources you have. Now in the moment, I can be with you in the moment. And with AI, see every resource around you. Hopefully, I hope we get to a point of if grants are there, how much, the process. So it allows me to be more with you because all the legwork, something else can kind of do that for me. However, I want to give the disclaimer, it doesn't take away the decision making, right? Everything is going to come back to me to put that human decision on it and that critical thinking. That's where we have to be careful with AI and technologies to not let it kind of get ahead of, the human being in control of making the final decision.
All right, let's put a bookmark in maybe some of the disclaimers, cautions, and all that. We can come to that. I tracked what you were saying, but again, just for the listeners, you're talking about the system side, the professional, freeing up time, reducing that administrative burden, all of that. So, can you explicitly spell out like when you're working with a service provider whose time is now freed up, what is the upside for the family?
I'm able to be more engaged with you. I'm able to actually ask questions about who you are, spend time with who you are, make better observations, right? I'm not worried about trying to figure out everything in the moment. So it allows me to be with you. It allows me to actively listen, and then it allows me to be a better clinician, caseworker, because whether I'm new or not, that's a big thing, right? If I'm new, I still have a tool that's going to allow me to have access to information I normally wouldn't have.
Okay. And when you have a service provider who has access to information and who's actively listening, what is that experience like on the youth end or the family end?
I think for me, if I put myself back in that kid that grew up in care or that kinship foster parent, it results in a higher level of trust, right? You're listening to me. You appear to have a higher level of competency. You're giving me information that is accurate, which increases trust, which increases my ability. It empowers me as well to kind of move. So I would say the biggest thing is the trust and to be able to work together and know that we're getting good information.
All right. So I put a bookmark. All of that sounds great, but there are considerations. And I know that you've started to kind of name some of those. And I think the listeners need to hear this, right? We need to go into it more. Especially, I wrote down the data continuity part. So considerations with data and when you talk about how to ask a question. So I know you're probably tracking where I'm going with all this, but there are people who hear AI in this space and they think, well, this could increase surveillance, bias, and harm. So that's where I want to go. So if AI is built without lived experience and community input, what specifically goes wrong?
Some of the things you just said, right? I don't doubt that those things aren't already happening, right? Working in tech now, I see where there's quite a bit of data that is collected on us that we don't have access to, or nor do we probably know has been collected. So where this could really go wrong is us not to be a part of that conversation and determining how our data is used, how our data is passed, who has access to our data. And yes, that puts us in a situation where maybe you have so much data that you're making cases that shouldn't be, right? But I don't have any access to those things. So, that's the reason why I think it's important for those who are experiencing and impacted by different sectors have to be at the table so we can set this before we do maybe get into a world that surveillance is very high and we don't have a counter for that.
Can you explain for people who don't know how, like you mentioned, like ChatGPT? Can you explain, like, if people don't know how that works? Specifically, I'm thinking back to when you said, like, if you ask ChatGPT how to ask a question, like, how does information get into these tools? And so how would bias get embedded into the tool?
Oh, great question. So I'll give you a concrete example. When I started to reskill, I went out to California to a NVIDIA conference, and I signed up for a deep learning session. Super excited, big conference. It was going to be an 8-hour workshop, and so I walked into this huge, conference center you can imagine, and there were about 300 people in that room. And I would say that the diversity in that room, not in just kind of race, culture, but just the diversity of where people come from, wasn't very vast. Um, and so, going into those situations where you see that not even trying to be intentionally biased, it's just you don't have the experiences that individuals need to really understand what they're building, and how they're building things. And so I think some intentional, some unintentional. It just works its way into it if we're not at the table. And let me be clear, even having individuals with lived experience at the table still brings a level of bias, right? We ourselves have bias. We're not above that. But when you have a collaboration of people who can come together, you have a better chance of working that bias down. And I do a lot of teaching, and when I teach around this, I say, if we're starting at 100% bias, can we get it down to 50, right? By working together, can we work even harder and get it down? It's gonna be there, but can we make it to a place where it's reasonable enough? It's not impacting, people's lives on a large scale.
All right. So, in general, like what happens when professionals define the problem without community?
I think we get what we have now. We have a system that's firing on all cylinders, not broken. I think we get policies. I think we get practices that are well-meaning, but also still do some harm to the community because the community is not often continuously invited and involved in creating those practices and policies and technologies.
All right, Derek, I want to pause here a little bit because I think that we might be missing something. And this is all really great context, especially for people that like really they don't know where AI is with child welfare and how does, modernizing technology, where is this conversation? What does it all mean? But I think it would be helpful for people to hear from you. Like, how did you come into all of this?
Not volunteering. You know, no, no. This is my life passion, and I'm one that, if you know me, I really believe in the universe, and it speaks to you, right? And I'm saying that because I'm literally sitting here looking at a picture. You said that you write notes, I write notes. I pulled out a notebook, and a picture fell out, which is a picture of me and my sisters in front of a DCF building on the visit, right? That's crazy to me that just fell out. So I was like, you know what? Let me put this up. I grew up in the system. My mom struggled with mental health and substance use disorder. My father struggled with the same. He ended up committing suicide when I was about 9 or 10. But I went into care at about 5 years old and went in and out. I'm an 80s baby. And so I went in and out of care throughout the 80s and 90s. I was one of those ones that was deemed a lost soul. I can't tell you how many times I heard I was going to be dead or in jail. I've been on my own since I was 15, literally. So I understand what it feels like to transition as a youth. I understand what it feels like to not necessarily have a core family system or have somebody to go to get those answers that you need in a moment, right? Not only in a moment, but accurate answers. Um, and then, life is life when you live when you come from that background. And then I would say for my nephew and my kids, I'm a father. I got 5 kids, and one of them is my nephew who also went into the system. So for me, this is intergenerational, and I just started to feel like the system, and this was at 7. I remember at 7 years old feeling like something wasn't right around me, and I felt helpless and I felt out of control. And I think all of this has stemmed from that over the years, being able to put people in control, give people tools and a voice, and kind of have some say in their destiny. And the last thing I'll say, I kind of got hooked on brain science and ACEs because I believe the one thing we have to be left with in order to have any sort of chance at all is our cognition. We got to have information. We got to have our executive functioning, our brain, and then you give me a fair chance to kind of walk through this life. So I've said before, my my well runs pretty deep. And this is life work I'll be doing for a while, but that's where it stems from.
So, what I heard from you is agency and power. And the system takes away agency and power. People might think power is the ability to control other people or have more privilege than someone else. Power is also information. It's just
Absolutely.
knowledge. And, when you interact with the system as a young person or an adult who missed out on learning things that their peers were learning because they were in survival mode, there's an imbalance because they know the ins and the outs. They know the procedures. They know, there's just that information that gives them more access and navigation. So again, it kind of links back to, it does. It links back to what we said earlier, that navigation, that access, that continuity, there's loss of data when you have missed years and disrupted years.
Yeah, that makes it much tougher. And to your point, I knew this was important coming up. I just didn't necessarily have direction all the time. I remember being described as passionate, even as an adult. Even given information as such as emotional regulation, right? We think about that in the software that we deliver. How do we give kids resources to actually regulate? I got suspended a lot. I lived in alternative schools. And when I look back, no one really taught me or even told me a concept of emotional regulation. Pass, read to, count to 10. So, what changed it for me was I had the opportunity to be a Robert Wood Johnson clinical scholar, and I will sing their praises to the day I die, because they gave the framework for all of this, right? I know when we first got there was a 3-year leadership program. Our project, I led a team to improve the long-term quality of life outcome for Florida foster youth and families, and it ended up being something more national. And this is where this started, right? This concept of education, mental and physical wellness, and technology. This was 2016 to 2019. But a part of that program as well is they built leaders. And so they would teach us the same tools that the Army forbade, if you want to call it, right? The other side, which I don't get too much into because I think that splits us. But we started to understand how narratives shape things, how policy, how funding. And so what I saw is an opportunity to take everything that had transformed me and bring it back to my community and allow the community to see these frameworks and have access to this information quickly, so that then you are equal and you do have the autonomy to kind of go back and forth if any system is looking to wrong you, right? Or as a community, I'm just as tough on the community. It gives us the autonomy to set up where we don't necessarily need systems, right?
All right, can you fill one gap in, and then I want to get to yes, what are you doing now? How are you giving back and transferring what you learned to community? So you talk about your past, growing up in care, adverse childhood experiences, alternative schools, all the things. You were a statistic left, right, up and down, or projected to be one, right? Then you get into this life-changing fellowship, and now everything is transformed. How did you get to the fellowship? What came in between?
Oh man. I tell people, sometimes people say you're a unicorn. I'm not. What came in between is what technology gives access to. I kind of started building a personal board of directors, and I didn't even know it, right? I had a little bit of charisma, and so, I had a little bit of grit. I played sports, and so I kind of ran into the world with this notion that I could take it on, right? And then I started to meet people along the way that provided me opportunities. I lived in Hawaii. That was life-changing, right? That gave me an opportunity. I made mistakes that in that culture, they wrap around you. I had an opportunity to see that. I had a kid at 19, right? That grows you up a bit. I've worked with families. And so I think what brought me to that is just I continued to stay true to the community. I've never left the community, never. And my opportunities just always seem to stem from some community event. So to give you the practical, I was marketing and selling telepsychiatry, telemedicine back in, I think, 2014 or something. And I was at a conference and I came across this booth called Robert Wood Johnson. They told me about free grant money. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, so I actually thought it was this gimmick. And I went upstairs that night and I looked it up, and I basically didn't go back to work in that conference. I had my idea ready to go. And the reason why I was so ready to go is I had already been in the community. And so that application was due a week later. And because I had a little good karma in the community, I helped this clinic start up a telepsychiatry without selling to them. And just so happened we became a team. And I'd never heard of Robert Wood Johnson. I didn't know, how large they were and how impactful they were. But it all comes back to me staying in the community, and my opportunities tend to come from there.
All right, so you learned from life because you were
Mm-hmm.
in the system. So you knew the need, you lived through the
Mm-hmm.
need. You got this opportunity with this fellowship that gave you the information because you already
Mm-hmm.
had the soft skills that can't be taught, right? You already had all that, but you got the technical skills from this fellowship and you were already in community. So you knew you had to bring this back to community, right? So walk me through what you've built and what you're still building. Like walk me through the Pathway
Yeah.
Navigator, like really concretely. Who's it for? When do they use it? What does it actually do?
Yeah, and let me give one more reference point because this matters, right? One of the biggest advantages I had in my journey was becoming a clinician, becoming a social worker, sitting in class, going through the DSM, and understanding my own situation. There was a lot of self-reflection that had to happen between, where I'm from and where I am now. Robert Wood Johnson helped with that. Being a clinician helped with that. Kind of learning the mental health side of things for myself and my family, right? So Pathway Navigator was born from this idea of always had that technology could transform it all, right? And so Pathway Navigator concretely is a AI powered tool that allows the community in any situation to navigate at any given point in time. So I like to give stories, right? Because it was built from real stories. And in that Robert Wood Johnson Clinical Scholar Fellowship, we worked with a group of kids that were a part of First Star Academy. Worked with them for 4 years, and I remember one of the first things I brought to them when I connected with their program director. We made a partnership, and I brought what was called the HoloLens. The HoloLens is this augmented reality thing that I'd never seen in my life. It came out maybe 5, 6 years ago, and I had this simple idea that I used to not know how to communicate my feelings, so I would get in a lot of trouble cursing people out. And I said, well, what if we were able to give kids the opportunity to get reps in situations that weren't real? So someone would teach me something, I would go get it wrong, and then I would end up getting suspended, arrested, or something like that because you only get one shot at it, right? So I said, man, we could use this augmented reality, virtual reality. They could go in, they could get a score, they could get feedback. You didn't do this, right? They could practice, practice, practice so that when they get in that situation, they're good to go. We weren't able to bring that to life just with the limitations of the fellowship. But fast forward, one of the great things about AI and technology right now is that access is wide open to everybody. It doesn't cost as much. You don't have to know as much. And so Pathway allows my youth that normally would come to me for things to go to Pathways and start their presenting problem. And that's the co-design part of it with clinicians. What is your presenting problem? My presenting problem is that I am on the verge of eviction, and then it's going to go start asking you questions, right? So it is dynamic. So you start there. Okay, what is the situation? How much do you owe? How long do you have? What steps have you taken? Do you have a lease? Once we collect all this information, it's going to give you back a plan. One of the issues that I would see with a lot of individuals I work with, especially my youth, is we give them a plan, but they don't know what step to take first. So they waste money and time taking the transportation down to the birth certificate office, but you need a social security card first, right? Or I don't have it housed. And so it draws out that plan for them. It tells them exactly what steps to take first. When I talk about that personal board of directors, we wanted them to be able to network. There are a lot of youth that have cell phones but don't have access generally. So what they do is they operate on social media when they get Wi-Fi. So how do we communicate? Through social media, making sure that they can connect with Pathway whether they have a phone or not, an active phone line or not. And so now they're able to get to resources quickly. Now they're able to get to their network, which includes their mentors, programs they're a part of. I can send a message out to multiple people at one time if I need to. It tracks mood. It gives you job seeking opportunities that are in your event. Your area. I could go on for days and days because this was something that has been built and continues to be built by the community. So every time we come up against a new problem, then we're able to address it in that sort of way. The other side of that is implementing VR. So allowing youth and parents and families to be able to practice skills, not just soft skills. The job market is shifting. And so through code design, that's one of the big things. It's not just technology, it's the code design as well, where we are teaching them through code design how to reskill themselves. So when you show up to the table with a state to build a CWIST, you understand what a requirement validation session is. You understand what agile is. You understand things that usually keep us from being able to really engage. So I don't want to lose us in just the technology. A lot of it is actually preparing the community to code design and be ready to take advantage of being a part of determining what technology and AI is going to look like.
All right, I want to go back to the navigation just for a minute. How is Pathway Navigator different from just like giving someone a list of resources?
Oh, because again, know your rights. Okay? I'm going to give you a concrete example. If anyone understands child welfare, they know your rights, right? A lot of times people have the Know Your Rights campaign. They have flyers. They have little kind of cards that they would give you. And so I was in a situation as a kinship caregiver where the courts, through some bad policies, I believe, kind of sparked off like an engagement to me and my nephew after a case was closed, right? In a moment, if I only know those 5 rights that are on that paper, that's all I know in the moment. However, being able to leverage AI and technology and say, hey, what is the statute? What is the law? How should I go about this? What rights do I have in this moment? I was able to do that real time. I was able to do that as I was talking to people on the phone. I know if that's a true statement or not a true statement. So what ended up happening is that case ultimately just didn't go anywhere. I think because individuals knew like, hey, we're not right on this. And it's not to say that anyone was trying to be malicious or things, but sometimes the system is going so fast that you can't get everybody to see the same picture, right? So that allowed me to be empowered and have real information that was accurate in the very moment. And that kept me and my family from the real conversation we had of me being held in contempt of court, being taken to jail, and me asking my nephew, would he be ready to go into another home while we fight this to show that this isn't right, right? But we had that leverage of technology.
All right, so I think I did this on the last episode too, or a recent one, but words come up in these spaces a lot. I know what they mean. You know what they mean, right? Not everyone knows what all the words mean, or they may just be repeating it because they hear it and it's not exactly in the correct context. So you've dropped co-design several times now, and I need to hear from you. What does co-design mean to you in practice? What does it actually look like?
So co-design is IU. IU, in the way we spell it, is AIEYU. That is derived from IUAYLLU. And the foundation of that is community life, where members work together for one another for the benefit of the community. For me, that is co-design. It is a community with equal platform, with equal position, with equal power, with equal proximity. And we all have an opportunity to work on behalf of our community, right? One of the things I learned working with even the workforce and working with families is that we're all a community. Once we get off work, once we, kind of take those titles off, we come back to the same community. And so for me, that is co-design. Co-design is community, and making sure that community is educated and informed enough to come into that space and really actively contribute to that space.
And I want to tie this back to something you said earlier, because I asked, what happens when professionals make decisions essentially without co-designing? And you said, well, we get the system now. So, we know that we have many youth that have aged out, and you being one of them, right? We have many that weren't set up for success because things were done for them without them, right? Mm-hmm. So what does success look like in Pathway Navigator?
It's that individual who is engaged with Pathway Navigator having the autonomy to make decisions and be informed in any given moment, and also have access to their network quickly. When you have those things, when you have information and you have support, and you have access to opportunities, right? And let me take it back. Let me break it down even more. I've worked with youth for so long, and I've seen this play out so many times. There are three things that youth need youth in general, but especially if you dealt with a lot of trauma. You need at least one supported, trusted adult in your life. Doesn't have to be a parent, but they've got one supportive, trusted adult. You need opportunities to sharpen your life skills and perceive control, and you need to understand your self-worth. That's how Pathway Navigator was built, and that's what success is. When you tap into Pathway Navigator, you can tap into many of trusted, supportive adults that you bring into that sphere, and you can tap into them at any given moment in time. When we go to that perceived control and that opportunities for life skill, now I have information where I can control the next outcome. My mom would say this a lot. Just make the next best move, right? We're trying to allow you to just make the next best move. If you're in a crisis, make the next best move. And then when you have those things, you have support, you have information, you have confidence, and you are competent, that's where self-worth stems from. And I think when people reach that self-worth, and my mom would say this to me a lot when I was younger, you still don't know your self-worth. You still don't know your self-worth. I'm still on the journey, but I know my self-worth. I know what I know. And I think when people know that, they navigate with a different sense of ownership in their life. So that's what Pathway Navigator does. It makes sure we can hit those three pillars, if nothing else, and much more.
All right, you just mentioned three pillars, but I was thinking back to like the two prongs you mentioned earlier. Like one is that like executive functioning that it can
Yes.
help you with and access to information. You also mentioned the upskilling, right? So
Yes.
can you make this real with like a real person? Like who has used Pathway Navigator and gotten that upskilling, and like where are they now? What are their next steps?
Well, I'll say it is a process because we're still in the co-design. If you go to Pathway Navigator, we're in the beta version. So that is the portion that can be difficult. Getting adoption widespread with individuals you're starting with that live in crisis, right? So if I'll give you an example, and this is why we live our process wide open, right, as a tech company. We had something so simple as one of my youth who was using Pathway, getting her kind of off of the social medias that they use now. Remember, we're competing. Facebook, Instagram, this is where they are now. So you really got to pull them over. It was as simple as we didn't have the notification turned on for me, right? So she would reach out to me and I wasn't getting the instant notification. So she would go right back to Facebook, right? Now, she's working her way through Pathway. And as she stays in Pathway, we worked her through that lease situation. So I know you're asking me about reskilling, but in this, from start to finish, when this individual was going through that eviction, we loaded the lease. We asked questions against the lease. We came up with a game plan to go and get ahead of talking to the manager. That was a process. She was scared to do that, right? So that puts her in a position where she got in front of the eviction. And then when the eviction happened, she had planned in a way where she actually had an interview to be a phlebotomist. Use Pathway Navigator again. Now we're communicating through Pathway Navigator. She didn't get it, right? But that's where we communicate to say, hey, you're going to get the next one. This is where we go over behavioral interviewing, where I say to her, hey, have you ever heard of behavioral interviewing? STAR. All of this is happening in Pathway Navigator. And the reason why it's happening in Pathway Navigator is because this is also data points we want them to have, right? So from start to finish, we are in the works. Pathway Navigator has been up and going for about 6-7 months. And so we don't want to race to all these folks before we co-design, but we are ready to go, but in a way that we are ready to go with the community. So we are building, we have youth that are in there, but we are on that journey.
All right. So can you be a little more specific about reach? Like what demographic, what geographic, like where is this and where are you wanting to expand at some point?
Yeah. I think where we're starting, we have some things going in Florida specifically. I am actually headed to DC this weekend to participate in Administration Children and Family Design-a-thon. So we want to be able to get into spaces where there are youth that are already co-designing, have an idea, and that community is there so that we can get that dispersed out into other communities. We're going to start and are in the process of starting a webinar series so that we'll invite kids nationwide. I would love to get First Star Academy again. I reached out to their CEO, so we'll keep going there. But we want to be in communities with real kids. And the reason why I say real kids, and I don't want people to take that the wrong way. Sometimes when it comes to impacted individuals or individuals with lived experience, there are certain individuals that can make it into rooms multiple times consistently, right? And a lot of times what happens, and I was one of those kids, I wasn't as polished early on. So I didn't get the opportunities. So specifically, we're looking for youth, transitioning youth, but also those youth that don't always have those opportunities to have that raw voice in the room, a part of that co-design and those processes. So that's where we're starting. And the reason why we're starting it there is because the White House executive order that is looking at modernizing tools for transitioning youth. We do that. We know that. However, Pathway Navigator is for all families, whether it be you're navigating healthcare, whether it be you're navigating child support system, whatever it is you're navigating, it is made for that broader demographic.
All right. So again, you talk about because we went from Florida, and now we're talking about the White House order and like federally and everything. So bring this back to just AI, tech, modernization. Like, what is your vision? If people really start to understand the opportunities that AI and VR and all these things bring, what would look different about the landscape of child welfare in a few years?
My big vision is you have much less families impacted and involved in the child welfare system. I think anybody who knows the actual underpinnings of child welfare knows a lot of this is poverty. A lot of this is lacking access to housing or a living wage. And those things that happen as a byproduct of poverty can often be called neglect. So in a world of technology, it first starts with the community and families having access to any resource they need, whether it be reskilling, whether it be I need to find childcare within my budget, whatever that is, I need to connect with my community family so that we can be informed and have the autonomy to kind of take care of our community. So that would be number one. As we bring those numbers down, because I do believe there is a place for child welfare and child welfare professionals, because there is a percentage of youth, very low, that do need. And so if we have families that are able to get in the driver's seat on their own prevention, then we have less overload of cases. And then we have tools that child welfare professionals can use to better serve those families and youth that actually do need the intervention of the child welfare system. And so at the end of the day, I want to strengthen and empower families. I want to make it where it's a single mother, single father, two-parent home. A lot of people think, just because I might not be living in poverty right now, that I still don't deal with needing access or resources as just a father, right? So Pathway Navigator is going to strengthen the family unit. Therefore, needing less, therefore eliminating the need or decreasing the need to lean on any system to the extent we do now.
All right. So if someone's listening and they are trying to decide whether AI is something to trust or be cautious of in this space, what do you most want them to understand before they dismiss it or embrace it too quickly?
I think both are true. I think just as excited as I am about technology and AI, I am just as cautious about it. So I would say what you need to know is to be informed and be involved as it evolves. We are headed into the fourth industrial revolution, so the more people we can get involved in understanding the importance of bringing their expertise, I think the better off we'll be long term with dealing with the negative sides that will come from AI. But I think if we can have a say in it and get in building out what is to come, we put ourselves in a better situation.
All right. So this conversation sits inside a much bigger shift. You talk about the, fourth industrial revolution, all of that. I heard a lot of equity, creating equity, that people that miss out on life skills, they miss out on things that other people are learning because they're in survival mode, because they are in the conditions that are caused by poverty, giving them the information and also like that body doubling support to be able to do it and push through and
Yes.
get there. So, what we talked about today, like AI is not some distant, far future issue. It's not the Jetsons, whenever, like it's here, right? And it's already shaping how people think and build and make decisions in this field. And what you're asking the listeners and everyone in the field to consider is not just whether AI can help, but who gets to shape it and
Absolutely.
whose needs it reflects, and what happens if the people most affected are left out of its design. So, because if these tools are coming either way, then the real question is whether they will deepen the same old harms of the systems that we've had, or whether they'll be used to help create something better. So, thank you, Derrick, for coming on here. Thanks for helping break down some of these complex things that some people may not understand, and for bringing your whole self and your experience and lived wisdom as well into this to really help people bridge those connections.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, and I appreciate the opportunity.
That was my conversation with Derrick Stephens. This episode sits inside a much bigger shift that many people in this field are only beginning to grapple with. AI is no longer a distant future issue. It is already shaping how people build tools, organize information, and make decisions that affect families and young people. What this conversation asks us to consider is not simply whether AI can help, but who gets to shape it, whose experiences inform it, and what happens if people most affected are left out of its design. Be sure to follow the podcast for new episodes. You can also rate and review the show on your favorite podcast platform and share it with others interested in the future of family well-being. We thank the Annie E. Casey Foundation for their continued support of the show. And thanks to our sponsor, Sunlight. Sunlight connects families and professionals in the child welfare system with innovative technology tools that improve communication, protection, trust, and transparency for better outcomes. Community Insight is produced in partnership with Imagination Factory and 14th Street Studios. Thanks to Matt Anderson, Tavon Lewis, Michael Osborne, and Morgan Honecker. The opinions and conclusions expressed in the podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Annie E. Casey Foundation.